Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. I have been on a bit of a unit study kick the past couple of weeks. I know that I've talked a few times about CONUS. I addressed unit studies several times. I'm actually writing a unit study right now for my Patreon patrons. And I realized that although I have talked about what unit studies are, and I have talked about how to use unit studies, and even how to plan and schedule them, I have not actually talked about the reason for unit studies. So that's what I'm going to address today. We're going to try to understand the whys of unit studies. All right, so the very first thing that I want to let you know is what a unit study is, in case you aren't really familiar with this kind of curriculum. I'm not going to get into it too much. If you really want a detailed explanation, you're better off going to one of my other videos about unit studies. But what a unit study basically is taking one topic and doing a deep study of that one topic and covering all of the subject areas while you are doing that. That is in a nutshell what a unit study is. I always link related videos and posts in my description box down below. I don't know if any of you have ever noticed it. I do it for every video. I will link related videos and other things that I think you might find helpful down there. So check that out if you want to know more about what unit studies are. But what we're going to talk about now is the whys. Why do people write unit studies, whether they are authors or even parents, and why do people use unit studies? Well, first of all, let's get into why they are written. The reason that unit studies are written is because it is a more holistic and it is a whole life way to learn. Okay, now if you think about what a school day looks like, it is very fragmented. Now I'm talking about a traditional school day. They have usually 7 or 8 periods of all different unrelated subjects. And once the bell rings, they have to stop what they're doing and move on to the next class. And very, very often, those classes have nothing to do with one another. Like what they're learning in history will have absolutely nothing to do with what they're learning about in science. Studies have actually shown, however, that children learn best when they approach learning in a more, as I said earlier, holistic way. When they are looking at one topic and studying all of the different subject areas about that one topic. Because kids understand things better when they are connected. They like to make those connections, and it helps to make things click for them, and it also helps them to retain information better. That is why unit study authors write unit studies. Again, in a nutshell, if you would ask unit study authors, they might give you some other reasons as well. For example, I just enjoy writing them, but it really is, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinion, a more effective way for children to learn than all of the disconnected subject areas that you tend to think of when it comes to school. Now, why do parents use unit studies? They very well might use it for that very reason. That is one of the reasons that I do unit studies with my children, because I like the more natural flow to our homeschool day. I like to delve deeply into topics with my children rather than having them just learn little shallow snippets of information on a topic out of a textbook. I also enjoy the hands-on aspect that comes along with unit studies, rather than just reading and writing constantly. There is always that variety in the day. But one thing that I really, really wanted to touch on today is the subject areas of unit studies. Again, they are cross-curricular. They cover all subject areas. Now, with most unit studies, they will tell you that you should supplement language arts and math, which I actually talked about yesterday in my CONUS video. you should always supplement language arts and math, because those are those two major subject areas that you really do want to make sure that you hit on every single day. However, all of those other subject areas, such as science and history and geography and art and music and physical education and health, all of those other subject areas are easily hit on just by delving deeply into a topic. Now, in order for you to understand that though, and I say this in almost every video, you have got to let go of that schoolish way of thinking. And when I say that, it's not just a talking point. I'm not just saying it because it's like some homeschool motto. I'm saying it because it is the truth. You will never be able to enjoy the full benefits of homeschooling if you cannot rid yourself of that schoolish mindset, of the idea that learning can only be done in certain ways and that it has to look like what they are doing in a school building. Until you rid yourself of that way of thinking, you're going to have a really tough time understanding unit studies and trusting in their effectiveness. So going back to those subject areas, for example, if you are studying, I once studied Frontier Life and Pioneers with my children in the CONUS Volume 1 unit study. While that focused a lot on history, because yeah, Pioneers, Frontier Life, it also touched on science. My kids and I were going out into the woods looking for animal tracks. We were also looking at photos of animal tracks, and the kids were learning how to identify them. We were learning about different animals that they used to trap on the frontier. For example, beavers. The kids learned about beavers. They watched a video about how beaver traps were made. There was some artwork that went in with that. And you know, this is a couple years ago, so I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head. But as you can see, that one topic, Pioneers and Frontier Life, easily integrated all of the aspects or all of the subject areas that you have to hit on for school. I think even health was incorporated because they might have gone over some illnesses that were common on the frontier. But you will not be able to understand fully until you just, it is so important. That's why I keep saying this over and over again. You've got to get that whole school aspect out of your head, because as much history and science is going on in the unit study, if you keep picturing subjects as only being covered if they are in specific books that say history and science and health, and if you picture all learning as being neatly packaged as that, you will not understand how easily all of these unit studies are covering all of the other subjects. And I have done this before, so I always say I speak from experience here. When I first started unit studies, I didn't understand that. And someone had just given me the unit study and never really explained to me how to use them. I didn't understand that since they were cross-curricular, you did not have to use everything else with them. But that is what I started out doing. I was doing a unit study, and then I was also doing a separate history and a separate science, because again, I did not see the learning that was happening in the unit study because I just expected it to look like school. And what ended up happening was I got burned out. And if you are insisting on doing that, if you are insisting on bringing in other curriculum other than language arts and math, if you are insisting on bringing in other curriculum besides the unit study, you are not reaping the full benefits of that unit study. Because again, when kids are learning in the fragmented way that they learn from these textbooks, this is very shallow learning. A commenter on one of my videos, I think that I've mentioned this before and I never remember who said it, but she basically said that she was a good school student. Now this is counting people who did well in school. She said that school made her a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And that is really what happens when you are just focusing on learning snippets of information rather than delving deeply into a topic. Now, if you start to get concerned that these unit studies are not covering this huge smorgasbord of topics that might be covered in the textbooks, again, because you're going more deeply into an area. You're not learning just a section or two on each topic. You're doing actual deep learning. Okay, but some people start to get a little bit worried about that and thinking, well, my kids aren't learning about all the different topics that they're learning about in school, and is this somehow going to affect them? In other words, will there be gaps in their learning? And I have addressed this before, and I will link this video in the description box as well. But what I'm going to say is that, first of all, the topics that are covered in schools are very arbitrary. There was no scientific method done to figure out what topics should be covered that would make a student most successful in life. There was no actual formula for finding that perfect array of topics. It just doesn't happen that way. It's arbitrary. A group of people sat down, decided this is what's going to be learned by schools, this is what textbooks are going to be written about, and so that is what is covered. If you think back to your own school years, chances are that you don't remember a whole lot of those other subject areas. Sure, you might remember a few things, like I remember what a meniscus is from my chemistry class. But to be honest with you, none of those things have ever made any sort of impact in my life. I have never needed them. Okay? So all of those topics that are being taught in school, there is a high likelihood they're never going to need it. Honestly. In the grand scheme of things, it just isn't going to come up. Reading and writing and those sorts of basic things, yes. But I always go back to Charlemagne for some reason, because this is one of those things. I remember nothing about Charlemagne. And I remember my teacher was all excited about Charlemagne. I remember nothing about him. So that's what I always bring back when I'm talking about this. I have never needed to know who Charlemagne was, what year he lived, or what he did. Never. Now, if my kids come to that area in history, I'm sure that I'm going to remember it better now than I did in school, simply because of the way that we are learning history. It is not in those snippets, those little sections of textbooks. We are delving deeply into those things. So maybe someday I will know who Charlemagne is, but it won't be because of school. It will be because of homeschool. It will be because of homeschool. I'm not sure if I said that right the first time. So I just really want you to understand that. So when you are covering different topics in unit studies, it doesn't matter if your kids are not learning the exact same things that they're learning in school, because you have to look at the other end. The kids in school are very likely not learning the same things that your kids are either. Your kids are very likely learning things the kids in school are not, and they're getting a deeper, better grasp of these subject areas. So I just really, that is something that I want you to understand, is that is why unit studies are written. It is holistic learning. It is because life is not broken up into subjects. Why should your child's education be broken up into subjects either? You want your children to understand that life is connected, that all things are connected. You want them to understand how to make those connections. And if you are approaching learning in a subject by subject way of thinking, they're not going to be able to see those connections as easily. And if you tack on that sort of learning on top of a unit study, you're guaranteed to burn out. And honestly, it is simply not needed. So now let's just talk about gaps real quick, because I did mention gaps. And you know what? When it comes to homeschooling, and this is something that I said in another video, when it comes to homeschooling, no matter what method you do, yes, your kids are going to have gaps in their learning. Whether you are a traditional homeschooler, whether you are a unit study homeschooler, a classical homeschooler, a Waldorf homeschooler, an unschooler, or going beyond homeschooling, if your child is a cyber schooler, if they are a private schooler, if they are in a public school, they are going to have gaps in their learning. There is no way that anyone on this planet does not have gaps in their learning. And that is because there is simply too much information. There are too many things out there for you to learn about and for you to understand. That is why the most important thing as a homeschooling parent that you can do for your kids is inspire them to want to learn, and give them the resources, teach them how to find information when they do want to find out about a topic that they don't know about. That is the most important thing that you need to worry about as a homeschooling parent. So I think that I have actually covered everything that I wanted to talk to you about when it comes to why we should do unit studies, why people write unit studies, what is the whole point of unit studies. I'm hoping that you have a better understanding of it. The point of unit studies really is about unity. Think about that word unit. It means one. It is because you are studying one topic, but you are tackling all of the subjects by just learning about that one topic. And I don't know any other way that I can accurately describe how important it is to just think about that holistic learning, thinking about making connections with your kids, think about showing them how to make those connections, and stop worrying about fragmented learning, and stop worrying about thinking that something does not count as history if it's not in a history book, or something doesn't count as science if it's not in a science book. That's not what real learning is about. All subjects are naturally integrated into life, whether they show up in a textbook or not. Anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them down below. And if you like my work, I will leave my Patreon link in the description box. You can check that out. And I hope you have a great day.